Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can know where the conversation is taking place. Also, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. And in both cases, make sure you hit the notification button. That way, you'll get notifications as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat as the program's going on. Also, take a moment, visit fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. Folks, it's the place to go to get all of your Pro 2A swag. T-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies. The best part about it is every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. Now, first of all, let me lay something out here. First of all, understand that the Firearms Policy Coalition is a nonpartisan organization. I think it's important for us to note that and make sure that you guys know and understand that. We recognize that there are people on both sides of the aisle for whom the Second Amendment is not a priority. That I think that's vitally important to understand. But I think also with that, I think it's also important to understand that one of those two particular parties is actually in the midst of making a clarion call, shall we say. And their goal, quite frankly, is to undo the Second Amendment. And that party is the Democratic Party. So I know some of you out there are Democrats, but I need you guys to understand that your party right now is in the process of seeking to undo our fundamental right to keep and bear arms. Andrew Cuomo, the governor of the state of New York, actually has been pushing and is now pushing a movement within the Democratic Party, the DNC, to basically make it, for lack of a better term, to make it official. In other words, to take Democratic advocacy on the issue of the Second Amendment or taking away of the Second Amendment and Second Amendment rights, but making that a priority amongst those within his party. And if you doubt that, I encourage you to, well, watch this little presentation by Mr. Cuomo.
On the issue of guns, we will look back one day in history and we will say, what were those people thinking? What were they thinking? How many times did you have to see the exact same episode and situation before basic sanity and common sense kicked in and overpowered this knee-jerk, nonsensical politics, which is all it is. It's just knee-jerk, nonsensical politics. They're afraid of the NRA. Mm-hmm. They're afraid of the NRA. And that is stopping common sense legislation, and it's killing people, literally. And we do nothing. Tomorrow is the anniversary of Tree of Life, the synagogue in Pittsburgh. 11 people killed, 7 people injured. What have we done? Nothing. Nothing. And there was absolutely no reason for it, and we know there's no reason. Now, Mark, when you put your head on the pillow at night and you say, you know, why? Why would a loving God do this? Why would a loving God take my beautiful son? There is no answer to it, but maybe you find some peace in the fact that everything for a reason, and what happened in Sandy Hook was heard. And it changed the laws in Connecticut, and it changed the law in the state of New York within weeks of Sandy Hook happening. We passed the SAFE Act. It was politically difficult. It politically caused me personally a lot of negativity. It still does today, because there is passion in the gun issue. Do not kid yourself. There is passion in those people who believe the Second Amendment trumps everything else. And their reading of the Second Amendment trumps everything else. But we passed the SAFE Act, which is the exact same law they're talking about today. Ban assault weapons because you do not need them. Ban high-capacity magazines. Do a full background check on everybody before they buy a gun.
All right, so let's be clear, and we've kind of laid the whole thing out. First of all, he says that, well, the Second Amendment, those people, and I want you to understand, when he talks about those people, he's talking about us, all right? We are now those people. But with that, it's important for us to recognize the other things that he talks about that clearly demonstrate that the Second Amendment doesn't matter to him. Because, first of all, when we talk about the fact that the Second Amendment trumps everything else. No, I don't believe that the Second Amendment trumps everything else. I just believe that when I start talking about constitutionally enumerated rights or fundamental human rights, those trump your desire to restrict my rights. You have to have a valid reason. It is ridiculous the fact that you think that you can just take away my rights simply because you want to. My rights trump your desire to take away my rights for no damn reason. Except that, well, you want to control me, right? That's exactly what he's talking about here, right? The fact that he wants to talk about, well, we need to take away weapons that they believe we don't need. And last I checked, they were called the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. There was no thing about need. It says, thou shalt not infringe, or you shall not infringe. I don't understand exactly where everything else came from, but when it says you shall not infringe, it seems pretty obvious to me. But clearly he demonstrates, number one, his contempt for those of us who believe in the Constitution and the Second Amendment, and those who choose to exercise a fundamental right with which he disagrees. But now his goal, his desire, is to make it national policy for the Democratic Party. Now, I'm not saying that it's not already. I'm not saying that most Democrats don't believe it already. I'm just saying that he now wants to make sure that every single presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket, anyone who's going to be running, which, by the way, they already do, is advocating for these things, is advocating for the taking of fundamental rights. Now, let's break down each one of these that he's, in particular, though, that he's talking about. Now, let's take a look at what some of these things. But first of all, let's take a look at some of his quotes. So here's one, and this is another statement that he made during a press conference. It says, as the federal government continues to abdicate its responsibility to protect the people of this country by failing to take action on meaningful, common sense gun control, it is now more important than ever to have a leader in Washington that has a plan to tackle these issues and end this violence once and for all. Now, I think the first thing that we need to understand with this particular quote is this. Violence has been around since the beginning of man. And any attempt by any person in political office to ever end it, every single attempt has utterly failed. Now, the reason why, Mr. Cuomo, is this is because you can't legislate the hearts of men. You just cannot. You will never, ever, ever legislate evil away. What you can do is you can address evil when it pops its head up. But the problem is that you're a member of a party that wants to, that when evil pops up, well, you don't want to address it. You don't want to be hard on them. You don't want to put evil in its place. You want to let evil out on the streets. And one need only look at your criminal justice policies, where you talk about being smart on crime, not you want to talk about not being tough on crime, but being smart on crime, which is code for let criminals out on the streets. That's kind of the way you do things in your party. The other thing is you talk about common sense gun reforms. And the problem with your quote unquote common sense gun reforms is that you and your party and the people who advocate for these policies know absolutely nothing about firearms policy, firearms technology. You don't care. So it may be common sense, but it's only common sense because most people really don't know a lot about those things. But for people who do understand it, when people bring up things that are obvious concerns, you flat out ignore them. You do. You flat out ignore them, no matter how legitimate their concerns are. Why? Because you're more interested in your press conferences and being able to say, I'm tough on guns and tough on crime, instead of actually, making sure that the rights of individuals are protected. But that's just this one part. Let's move on to the next part of his quote. That's why I'm asking all Democrats running for president to make a simple, clear choice for the American people and sign the Make America Safer pledge. Okay, so I think all of us are in agreement when we say that this pledge will not make America safer. It won't make America safer at all. But I also wanted to break down for you guys exactly what the things are. And he talked real briefly about it, but let's talk a little bit about what the things are that he wants to make sure that they commit to doing. All right, so one of them has to do with, go back there. One of them has to do with universal background checks for gun purchases. In other words, every single gun purchase has to go through a universal background check. Now, let's just be clear. We've already determined that 96% of all firearms that are recovered at crimes or involved in crimes, guess what? They weren't in the possession of the person who originally purchased it. So they weren't purchased from a firearms retailer. So I don't understand exactly what good a background check is going to do in order to reduce gun violence. But okay, I also know that a number of the purchases that have been made by those who committed mass shootings were also purchased, and they went through a background check. And guess what? Nope, didn't stop it anyway. But we all know that's not going to do any good. All right, then we also know ban centerfire semi-automatic rifles and standard capacity magazines. Once again, the interesting thing about this about this one is that we all know that these rifles that they're talking about are used in rifles as a whole are used in less than 2.1% of all murders, 2.9% of all gun crimes, and that's rifles as a whole. That doesn't even include these sorts of firearms, right? We're not even talking about these sorts of firearms. That's a fraction of that percent. So we're not even talking about firearms that are being used in crimes. And we've also seen studies that have been done that say actually that standard capacity magazines save lives. They don't cost lives. So that one is really kind of a moot point. And then finally, a national red flag law. You guys know what these are. These are basically laws where they can take away your right to keep and bear arms. Someone goes before a judge and says this person's a danger to themselves or others. You lose your rights without even having your day in court. Well, eventually you do get your day in court. It's just after the fact, and you are then, by the way, guilty until proven innocent. Folks, this is the pledge that he wants people to commit to. These are the laws that the Democratic Party wants people to commit to, and is probably going to wind up being a significant part of their party platform for 2020. And so if you are a Democrat and if you believe in the values that we espouse here at the Firearms Policy Coalition, then it's time that you either fight to take back your party or it's time that you, fight to take back your party, or it's time that you looked at becoming members of another party. And once again, I'm not saying there's a perfect party out there. I'm just saying that when a party specifically says, when a political group specifically says that I am fighting to take away your fundamental rights, and they say it as a matter of policy, and we're talking and unequivocally in no certain terms. And I don't care what Mr. Cuomo talks about when he talks about our reading of the Second Amendment. It says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I don't know any other way you can read that I really don't. But, hey, anti-gunners seem to think they're so much smarter than us. And, I figured out why they think they're so much smarter than us. Because you have to jump through so many mental hoops and make so many mental machinations in order to make what they believe make sense. Well, you must be smarter if you've got to jump through that many hoops in order to make common sense not common sense anymore. I like to call it uncommon sense because most of what these folks push, it's more like common nonsense. Anyway, folks, hey, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing these videos, telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.